My white CEO husband looked me dead in the eye and said the words that would haunt him forever. I need someone who fits my world better. What he meant was someone whiter, richer, more acceptable to his racist family. So he replaced me with a blonde heiress who looked perfect in his family photos, thinking I'd just disappear quietly like a good little ex-wife. But 3 months later, when I landed my private jet on his father's perfectly manicured lawn in the middle of their garden party, the look of shock on his face was worth every tear I'd cried. He had no idea that while he was busy trading up, I was building an empire that would make his family's old money look like pocket change. And when he finally realized what he'd thrown away, it was already too late. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me what country you're from. Because this story of quiet revenge is about to get wild, and you won't want to miss what happens when karma comes with a net worth. I should have seen it coming. Maybe I did. Maybe that's why my hand stayed steady when Evan told me he was leaving. The morning light streamed through our kitchen windows, hitting the granite countertops just like it had every day for the past 3 years. I was making his coffee the way he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. My wedding ring caught the light as I stirred. Nia, we need to talk. His voice sounded different, careful, like he was handling something fragile. I turned around, coffee mug in my hand, and looked at my husband. He was already dressed for work in his charcoal suit, the one that made him look like the CEO he was. His blonde hair was perfectly styled. His blue eyes couldn't quite meet mine. I've been thinking a lot lately, he said, about us, about where we're going. I set the mug down on the counter. Okay. I think we want different things, Nia. I think we've grown apart. The words hung in the air between us. I watched him fidget with his watch, a nervous habit I'd noticed during our 2 years of dating and 3 years of marriage. He only did it when he was lying. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, I've been unhappy for a while. I should have said something sooner, but I kept hoping things would change. What things? He ran a hand through his hair. You know what I mean. The way you handle social situations. The way you dress for company events. The way you fit into my world. There it was. The thing he'd been dancing around for months. I wasn't white enough. Wasn't polished enough. Wasn't the right kind of wife for a man like Evan Whitmore. I picked up his coffee and handed it to him. I see. He looked surprised by my calm reaction. You do? You're saying I'm not good enough for your world. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. He took the coffee but didn't drink it. I think we'd both be happier with people who understand us better. People? Someone. I mean someone. My chest tightened. You already found her. He had the decency to look ashamed. It's not what you think. What is it then? It's complicated. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. No, Evan, it's really not. I turned back to the sink and started washing the breakfast dishes. The warm water felt good on my hands. Normal. Like this was any other morning, and my husband wasn't standing behind me, breaking up our marriage because I wasn't white enough to be his trophy wife. I want you to know this isn't easy for me, he said. I'm sure it's very difficult. Don't be like that. I scrubbed a plate harder than necessary. Like what? Calm? Would you prefer if I screamed? I'd prefer if you tried to understand. I dried my hands on the dish towel and turned to face him. I understand perfectly. You married me when it felt exciting and different. Now you need a wife who looks good in your family photos. That's not fair. No, it's not. He set his coffee down without touching it. I'd like us to handle this maturely. Of course you would. I mean it, Nia. We can be civilized about this. Civilized. Like I was some wild thing that needed taming. Like leaving your wife of 3 years for another woman was civilized as long as you used the right tone. When do I meet her? I asked. He blinked. What? Your upgrade. When do I get to see what you're trading up for? It's not like that. When, Evan? He shifted on his feet. Actually, I'm meeting her for coffee this afternoon. You could. I mean, if you wanted to. You want me to meet your new girlfriend? She's not my girlfriend. Not yet. We're just talking. I nodded. What time? 3 o'clock. At that cafe you like downtown. The one with the... I know the one. He looked relieved. You'll come? I'll be there. He picked up his briefcase. Thank you for being so understanding about this. Understanding. Like I was being reasonable instead of having my heart carved out with a spoon. You're welcome, I said. After he left, I stood in our kitchen for a long time. The morning light had shifted, and everything looked different now. The granite countertops, the stainless steel appliances, the wedding photos on the refrigerator. It all belonged to someone else's life. I went upstairs and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Dark skin, natural hair pulled back in a simple bun, brown eyes that looked tired even though I'd slept well. I wasn't ugly, I knew that. But I also wasn't Evan's idea of what a CEO's wife should look like. I changed into a simple black dress and low heels, nothing too fancy. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. The cafe was crowded when I arrived at 3. I spotted Evan immediately. He was sitting at a corner table with the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in person. She had the kind of blonde hair that cost a fortune to maintain. Perfect makeup. Designer clothes that probably cost more than I made in a month at the administrative office where I worked. She was white. Of course she was. I walked over to their table. Evan looked up and his face went pale. Nia. Hi. You came. You invited me. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You must be Nia. I'm Madeline Brooks. She held out her hand and I shook it. Her skin was soft, no calluses, no rough spots. She'd never scrubbed dishes or worked with her hands. Nice to meet you, I said. Evan has told me so much about you. I looked at my husband. All good things, I hope. Madeline's smile flickered. Of course. I sat down in the empty chair. So, how did you two meet? Evan cleared his throat. Madeline's father owns Brooks Industries. We've been working on some business deals. How nice. Mixing business with pleasure. Madeline sipped her latte. Evan and I have a lot in common. Similar backgrounds, you know. Similar backgrounds. Code for similar skin color. That must be refreshing for him, I said. Evan shot me a warning look. Nia. What? I'm just saying it must be nice to find someone who fits so naturally into your world. Madeline's smile was getting tighter. Evan mentioned you two were having some difficulties. Did he? What kind of difficulties? Growing apart, wanting different things. Interesting. I thought we wanted the same things. Love, respect, faithfulness. The silence stretched between us. Other conversations buzzed around our table, but we sat in our own bubble of tension. I should go, I said finally. Nia, wait. Evan reached for my hand, but I pulled away. It was lovely meeting you. Madeline. I'm sure you and Evan will be very happy together. We're not together, she said quickly. Yet. I left them at the table and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. My phone buzzed with a text from Evan, but I didn't read it. I had somewhere to be. The charity fundraiser that evening was the kind of event Evan loved. Rich people in expensive clothes, talking about helping the less fortunate while eating food that cost more than most people's rent. I'd attended dozens of these events as his wife, smiling and making small talk and feeling like a fraud the entire time. Tonight was different. Tonight I wasn't pretending to belong. I wore the blue dress Evan had bought me for Christmas. It was beautiful and made me feel confident. I needed that tonight. Evan was already there when I arrived. So was Madeline. She wore a silver gown that probably cost more than my car. She looked like she'd been born to wear it. They were standing together near the auction display, and from across the room, they looked perfect. Two beautiful white people who belonged in this world of money and power and privilege. I walked over to the bar and ordered a glass of wine. The bartender was a young black man who gave me a knowing look. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. "Something like that. Those people can be difficult." I followed his gaze to where Evan and Madeline were laughing with a group of donors. Yes, they can. I spent the evening watching my husband with his new woman, watching how she touched his arm when she laughed, watching how he introduced her to people as his dear friend, watching how perfectly she fit into conversations about vacation homes and country clubs and investments, watching how no one questioned her right to be there. "Nia!" I turned to see Thomas Whitmore, Evan's father, approaching with a drink in his hand. His face was flushed from alcohol and what looked like excitement. "Thomas, good to see you." "Likewise, my dear. Have you met Evan's friend, Madeline Brooks?" "I have. Lovely girl, impressive family. Her father and I went to Yale together, you know." "I didn't know that." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Between you and me, I think this could be very good for Evan, for the business. The Brooks family has connections we could really use." My stomach turned. "I see. Don't get me wrong. You're a lovely girl. But sometimes these things work out for the best, don't you think?" He patted my shoulder and walked away, leaving me standing alone by the bar. Later, I saw Evan and Madeline dancing. She moved like she'd been trained in ballroom dancing since childhood. Graceful. Elegant. Everything I wasn't. They looked happy together. Natural. Like they belonged. I left early and went home to pack. Our bedroom felt strange as I folded clothes and put them in suitcases. 3 years of marriage, reduced to a few bags. I didn't take much. The jewelry he'd given me. Some books. My laptop. Clothes. I left my wedding dress hanging in the closet. Evan came home around midnight. I heard him stumble slightly on the stairs. He'd had too much to drink. He appeared in the bedroom doorway and stopped when he saw my suitcases. "What are you doing?" "Packing." "Where are you going?" "Away." He sat down heavily on the bed. "Look, about tonight. About what my father said. He was drunk. But he wasn't wrong." Evan rubbed his face. "It's not about her family's connections, isn't it?" "Okay, maybe partly. But that's not the only reason I'm attracted to her." Attracted. Past tense of pretending this was still theoretical. "What are the other reasons?" He was quiet for a long moment. "She understands the pressure I'm under, the expectations. She knows how to handle herself in these situations. And I don't. You try. I know you try. But it's not natural for you." Natural. Like being comfortable around racist rich people was supposed to be natural for anyone. "You're right," I said. "It's not natural for me to smile, while your father tells me I'm not good enough for his son." He never said that. He didn't have to. I zipped up my last suitcase. "I'll stay at my Aunt Ruth's for now. You can have your lawyer call me about the divorce." "Nia, wait. We don't have to rush into anything." "You introduced another woman as your dear friend tonight. I think we've rushed already." He stood up. "I know this is hard, but maybe it's better this way. Maybe we'll both be happier." Happier. Like happiness was something you could trade up for. Like a car or a house. Maybe you're right. I picked up my bags and walked toward the door. "Nia." I turned around. "I want you to know that I did love you. I do love you. I know. But sometimes love isn't enough." "No," I said. "Sometimes it's not." I left our house at 5 in the morning, while Evan was still asleep. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful. I'd forgotten that mornings could be beautiful. Ruth lived in a small house on the other side of town. She answered the door in her bathrobe, took one look at my suitcases, and stepped aside to let me in. "Tea or coffee?" she asked. "Tea." She made chamomile tea in her small kitchen while I sat at her table and tried to figure out how to explain what had happened. Ruth was my mother's sister, the woman who'd raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 15. She'd seen me through heartbreak before. "He's leaving me for a white woman," I said, when she handed me the steaming mug. Ruth sat down across from me. She didn't look surprised. "Rich white woman? Very. Pretty. Beautiful." Ruth nodded. "When's the wedding?" "Aunt Ruth." "I'm serious. Men like that don't waste time. If he's found his upgrade, he'll want to close the deal fast." I sipped my tea. It was too hot, but the burn felt good. Real. "He wants a quick divorce." "I bet he does. Probably wants to avoid any messy publicity." "Probably." Ruth reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "How are you feeling, baby?" "Numb." "That's normal. The hurt will come later." "I don't know if it will." "Is that wrong? Shouldn't I be more upset?" Ruth studied my face. "Maybe you saw this coming. Maybe you've been preparing yourself without realizing it. Maybe I had been. Maybe the signs had been there all along, and I'd just been too afraid to acknowledge them." "What do I do now?" I asked. "You take care of yourself. You remember who you are. And you don't let him make you feel small. He already has." "No, honey, he's tried to. There's a difference." I stayed at Ruth's that morning, drinking tea and watching the sun climb higher in the sky. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Sometimes the most comforting thing is just being with someone who loves you no matter what. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Evan. "Nia, we need to talk about the logistics of this." "What logistics?" "The divorce? The house? Our assets?" "Our assets. Like I had any assets worth discussing." "Whatever you want, Evan. I don't want to leave you with nothing." "You already have." "I mean financially. I want to be fair. Fair. Like there was a fair way to discard someone." "I'll have a lawyer call you," I said, and hung up. Ruth looked at me from across the room. "You okay?" "I will be." And for the first time since this whole thing started, I actually believed it. The divorce meeting took place in a sterile conference room downtown. Evan's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Henderson, spread papers across the mahogany table like she was dealing cards. The mediator, Mr. Jameson, looked tired already, and we hadn't even started. "This should be straightforward," Patricia said, adjusting her glasses. "Mr. Whitmore is prepared to be very generous." I looked at the settlement offer. It was more money than I'd ever seen at one time, but compared to Evan's wealth, it was pocket change. Enough to start over, not enough to matter to him. "This looks fine," I said. Everyone in the room seemed surprised by my calm response. They probably expected me to fight for more, to make this difficult. But I just wanted it over. "You don't want to review it with an attorney?" the mediator asked. "No, thank you." Evan shifted in his chair. He kept looking at me like he was waiting for me to break down, to beg him to reconsider. Instead, I signed every paper they put in front of me. "Nia," he said as we gathered our things, "are you sure about this?" "About what?" "About not fighting for more. The house, the business assets. I could what? Make your life difficult? Drag this out for months?" I shook my head. "I don't want anything that belongs to your world, Evan." Patricia looked pleased. Quick divorces made everyone happy, except the person getting divorced. "We'll file these papers today," she said. "You should be officially divorced within 2 weeks." 2 weeks to undo 3 years of marriage. It seemed both too fast and not fast enough. I spent those 2 weeks at Ruth's, helping her with small projects around the house, and trying to figure out what came next. I'd taken a leave of absence from my administrative job. I couldn't face going back there yet, answering questions about why I wasn't wearing my wedding ring anymore. But I wasn't completely without work. For the past year, I'd been doing side projects for the Hamilton family office, managing schedules and coordinating travel for their various business interests. It had started small. Mrs. Hamilton had been impressed with how I'd handled the logistics for a charity event Evan and I attended, and she'd asked if I'd be interested in helping with some personal projects. What started as weekend work had grown into something more substantial. The Hamiltons trusted me. More importantly, they respected me. When Mrs. Hamilton heard about my divorce, she'd called personally. "Nia, darling, I'm so sorry to hear about your troubles," she'd said. "But I want you to know that your position with us isn't affected. In fact, we'd like to expand your responsibilities, if you're interested." I was interested. Very interested. The expanded role came with access to resources I'd never imagined. Private jets for urgent business trips. Luxury accommodations. A company credit card with a limit that made my head spin. The Hamiltons weren't just wealthy. They were generational wealth. Old money that moved quietly through the world. And they treated me like family. 3 days before the divorce was finalized, Mrs. Hamilton called with an unusual request. "Nia, I need you to coordinate a pickup in the city this weekend. It's rather last minute, I'm afraid." "Of course. What kind of pickup?" "We're acquiring a piece of art from a private collector. The seller is having a garden party this weekend to show it off one last time before the sale. I need someone there to handle the transaction and arrange transport." She gave me the address. My blood went cold when I recognized it. The Whitmore family estate. "Mrs. Hamilton, I should probably mention—" "Oh, I know exactly who they are, dear. Evan Whitmore used to be married to you, didn't he?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, then this should be interesting." That Saturday morning, I stood in front of my closet at Ruth's house, trying to decide what to wear to my ex-husband's family party. Nothing too flashy. Nothing that looked like I was trying to prove something. I settled on a simple cream-colored dress and low heels. Elegant, but understated. I pulled my hair back in a neat bun and kept my makeup minimal. Ruth watched me get ready from the bedroom doorway. "You nervous?" she asked. "A little." "Good. Means this matters to you." "What if he thinks I'm stalking him?" "Let him think what he wants. You're there for work." Ruth was right, but my hand still shook slightly as I drove toward the Whitmore estate. The Hamilton family jet would meet me there. They'd arranged to land on the private airstrip that Thomas Whitmore had built for business guests. Except when I arrived, I discovered there had been a change in plans. "The airstrip is under maintenance," Caleb Moore, the Hamilton family pilot, explained when he called. "We'll have to land on the lawn instead." Mrs. Hamilton cleared it with the tower. "Should be fine." "On the lawn." "It's a big lawn, and it's been dry lately, so the ground is solid. Don't worry, I've done this before." The garden party was in full swing when I walked up the driveway. White tents dotted the expansive back lawn. Well-dressed guests mingled with champagne glasses, their laughter carrying on the warm afternoon breeze. I spotted Evan immediately. He was standing near the main tent with Madeline, greeting guests like this was their engagement party. She wore a pink sundress that probably cost more than most people's cars, and her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves. They looked happy, content, like they belonged together in this world of manicured gardens and old money. I checked my phone. Caleb would arrive in 10 minutes. I made my way through the crowd, nodding politely at people I recognized from previous events. A few gave me curious looks. What was Evan's ex-wife doing here? But most were too polite to stare. The artwork I was there to collect was a small but valuable sculpture by a contemporary artist the Hamiltons collected. It sat on a pedestal near the house, surrounded by admirers who were discussing its significance. "Nia?" I turned to see Thomas Whitmore approaching, looking confused. "Hello, Thomas. I didn't expect to see you here. Are you... well?" "I'm very well, thank you." "Good. Good. That's good. He clearly didn't know what else to say. I felt almost sorry for him. I'm actually here on business, I said. Business? Before I could explain, the sound of engines filled the air. Everyone at the party looked up as a sleek private jet appeared over the tree line, approaching the estate. What the hell? Someone muttered. The jet circled once, then lined up with the main lawn. Guests scattered as it touched down smoothly on the grass, its engines slowing as it rolled to a stop about 50 yards from the main tent. The silence was deafening. Every person at the party stood frozen, staring at the aircraft that had just landed in the middle of their garden party. Champagne glasses hung forgotten in hands. Conversations died mid-sentence. I walked calmly toward the jet, my heels clicking on the stone pathway. Behind me, I could hear whispers starting. Whose plane is that? Did someone call for emergency transport? How did it get clearance to land here? Caleb appeared at the top of the jet stairs, looking professional in his pilot uniform. He descended and met me halfway across the lawn. Ms. Carter, apologies for the dramatic entrance. The tower cleared us for an emergency business landing. No problem at all. Do you have the item? I nodded toward the sculpture. Right over there. We walked together toward the stunned crowd. I could feel every eye on us as we approached the pedestal where the artwork sat. Excuse me, I said politely to the small group surrounding it. They stepped aside, still staring. Caleb produced a carefully wrapped container from his bag and began the delicate process of securing the sculpture for transport. Nia. I turned to find Evan standing behind me, his face pale with shock. Madeline was beside him, gripping his arm like she was afraid he might collapse. What is this? He asked. I'm sorry for the disruption. I'm here to collect this piece on behalf of my employer. Your employer? The Hamilton family office. I watched understanding dawn on his face. The Hamilton family was legendary in their circles. Old money, serious money, the kind of wealth that bought privacy and respect without needing to flaunt it. Since when do you work for the Hamiltons? About a year now. But you were working at that administrative office. I was doing both. Caleb finished securing the artwork. We're ready, Ms. Carter. I turned back to Evan. It was good to see you. Please give my regards to your father. Wait, Nia, wait, I don't understand. When did you? But I was already walking toward the jet, following Caleb across the lawn. Behind us, the party guests murmured among themselves, trying to piece together what they'd just witnessed. Since when do you fly private? Evan called out, his voice carrying across the lawn. I paused at the bottom of the jet stairs and looked back at him. He stood in the middle of his father's perfect lawn, surrounded by his perfect guests, next to his perfect new girlfriend, looking completely lost. Since I needed to, I said simply. I climbed the stairs and settled into the leather seat as Caleb prepared for takeoff. Through the window, I could see the party slowly resuming, but with a new energy. People clustered in small groups, talking animatedly, pointing at the jet, looking at Evan with new questions in their eyes. As we lifted off, I caught a glimpse of him still standing there, watching us disappear into the afternoon sky. That evening, my phone buzzed constantly with texts from Evan. What just happened? How long have you been working for the Hamiltons? Why didn't you tell me? Can we talk? I ignored them all. Ruth was waiting for me when I got back to her house, sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea. How did it go? She asked. Smoothly. And Evan? Confused. She laughed. I bet he was. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work for the Hamilton family office. They were impressed with how I'd handled the art acquisition, especially under such unusual circumstances. You remained completely professional, Mrs. Hamilton said during our phone call, even in what must have been a difficult situation. It was my job. Yes, but many people would have let personal feelings interfere. You didn't. Meanwhile, Evan's texts continued. They grew more desperate as the days passed. I've been thinking about us. I made a mistake. Madeline isn't you. Can we please just talk? I finally responded. I hope you and Madeline are happy together. His reply came immediately. She ended things. I stared at the text for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Because I realized something important. I didn't care. For 3 years, I'd built my life around being Mrs. Evan Whitmore. I'd shaped myself to fit into his world, made myself smaller to make him more comfortable, apologized for taking up space in rooms where I had every right to be. And now, sitting in Ruth's small kitchen with a cup of tea and my laptop open to emails from clients who respected my work, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like myself. A week later, I attended a charity fundraiser downtown, not as Evan's wife, but as a representative of the Hamilton family office. I wore a navy blue dress I'd bought with my own money and felt confident in my own skin. Evan was there, of course. These events were part of his social obligation as CEO. But he was alone. No Madeline in sight. He found me by the bar during the cocktail hour. You look beautiful, he said. Thank you. Can we talk? We're talking now. He glanced around at the crowd. Privately. I don't think that's necessary. Nia, please. I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But seeing you at my father's house last week, seeing how successful you've become. I was always successful, Evan. You just never noticed. I notice now. Too late. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. It doesn't have to be. We could try again. We could what? Pretend you didn't leave me for someone you thought was better. Pretend your father didn't tell me I wasn't good enough for your family. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I finished my wine and set the glass on the bar. Excuse me. I see someone I need to speak with. I walked away from him, joining a conversation with other foundation representatives. But I could feel his eyes on me all evening, watching me move through the room with the confidence he'd tried to take away. Later that night, Ruth was waiting up for me when I got home. How was it? Evan was there. And nothing. He wanted to talk about getting back together. Ruth raised an eyebrow. What did you tell him? That it was too late. Good girl. I kicked off my heels and sat down beside her on the couch. You know what the strangest part is? What? I'm not angry anymore. I should be furious. But mostly I just feel free. Ruth smiled. Freedom looks good on you. She was right. For the first time in years, I was living my own life instead of trying to fit into someone else's. And it felt wonderful. 2 months after the charity fundraiser, Evan showed up at Ruth's house. I was in the small garden behind her kitchen, replanting some flowers that had died during the summer heat. My hands were dirty, my hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and I was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt. I felt comfortable, happy even. Nia. I looked up to see him standing at the garden gate, looking like he'd lost weight. His usually perfect hair was slightly messy, and there were dark circles under his eyes. How did you find me? I asked around. I went back to planting. You shouldn't be here, Evan. I know, but I needed to see you. Why? He opened the gate and walked into the small garden. Ruth's flowers were simple, nothing like the expensive landscaping at his father's estate. Marigolds and petunias and sweet peas that she'd grown from seeds. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what I did. I kept my hands busy with the soil. And I was wrong. About everything. Okay. Is that all you're going to say? I sat back on my heels and looked at him. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Something. Anything. I already said okay. He ran his hands through his hair, that nervous gesture I remembered so well. I miss you. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Sorry? I thought about it. Yes, I don't like seeing anyone hurt. But you're not hurt. No, I'm not. That seemed to upset him more than if I'd been crying. He sat down on Ruth's small porch steps, looking lost. Madeline and I broke up, he said. I heard. She said I talked about you too much. She said I kept comparing her to you. I planted another marigold. That wasn't fair to her. No, it wasn't. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere in the distance. A bee hummed around Ruth's lavender bush. I've been seeing a therapist, Evan said suddenly. I looked at him in surprise. Really? Dr. Martinez. She's helping me understand some things about myself, about why I made the choices I made. That's good. She says I have issues with how I see success, that I confuse status with worth. Do you agree with her? He was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, I think I do. I finished planting the last flower and wiped my hands on a towel. I'm glad you're getting help. I learned some things about you too, about the work you've been doing. Oh, Thomas mentioned that the Hamiltons bought that sculpture for $12 million. I didn't respond. He said they only use you for their most important acquisitions now, that you've been managing their art collection for over a year. Your father talks too much. Evan laughed, but it sounded hollow. He does. He also said they're considering offering you a permanent position. Vice President of Cultural Assets. Maybe. That's a big job, Nia. A really big job. I stood up and gathered my gardening tools. I should go inside. Ruth will be home soon. Wait. He stood up too. Can we talk? Really talk? Maybe somewhere neutral? About what? About us. About what I threw away. I looked at him for a long moment. He seemed different somehow. Smaller. Less sure of himself. Okay, I said finally. But not here. We met the next day at the same cafe where he'd introduced me to Madeline months earlier. It felt strange sitting across from him at the small table, like we were characters in someone else's story. You look good, he said when I sat down. Thank you. Happy. You look happy. I was happy. Working with the Hamilton family had opened doors I'd never imagined. They'd introduced me to museum curators, gallery owners, art dealers from around the world. My input mattered. My opinions were valued. I was building something that belonged to me. I am happy, I said. Evan nodded like that hurt him somehow. I'm glad. The waitress brought our coffee, black for him, cream and sugar for me. Some things never changed. I owe you an apology, he said. You already apologized. No, I gave you excuses. There's a difference. I waited for him to continue. I left you because I was ashamed of myself, not because of anything you did wrong. Ashamed? My father, my business partners, the people in our social circle. They all had expectations about what my wife should be like. And instead of defending you, instead of telling them to go to hell, I started seeing you through their eyes. I sipped my coffee. It was too bitter, but I didn't ask for more cream. I saw their disapproval when you spoke up at dinner parties. I saw their surprise when you knew as much about art as they did. I saw their discomfort when you didn't laugh at their casual racist jokes, and you were embarrassed by me. No, I was embarrassed by them, but I was too much of a coward to admit it. I set down my cup. So you found someone who made things easier. Yeah, I found someone who fit their idea of what I should have. Someone who would make them comfortable. Someone white. Someone white, he agreed. Someone with the right background, the right connections. The right look. Someone who wouldn't challenge anyone. Exactly. I leaned back in my chair. At least you're honest about it now. Dr. Martinez says honesty is the first step toward change. Are you? Changing? I'm trying. I left the country club. That surprised me. Your father must have been furious. He was. But I couldn't keep sitting in rooms where people said terrible things about others and act like it was normal. Good for you. I also fired Patricia Henderson. Your lawyer? She made some comments about you during the divorce proceedings that I should have challenged at the time. I remembered Patricia's smug efficiency, how pleased she'd seemed when I'd agreed to the settlement without a fight. What kind of comments? She said it was refreshing to work with someone like you who knew their place. She meant it as a compliment. My stomach tightened. I see. I should have fired her on the spot. Instead, I said nothing. I was so focused on getting through the divorce quickly that I ignored how she was treating you. It doesn't matter now. It does matter. Everything matters. We sat in silence for a few minutes. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, but our corner table felt isolated from the noise and chatter. Nia, Evan said finally, I know I don't deserve it. I know I hurt you in ways I'm still understanding. But is there any chance we could try again? I'd been expecting this question, but it still hit me like a small shock. What would be different? I asked. Everything. I'm different. Are you? I think so. I hope so. I studied his face. He seemed sincere, but sincerity wasn't enough. Not anymore. I appreciate that you're working on yourself, I said carefully. I really do. But I can't be your chance to prove you've changed. That's not what I'm asking for. Isn't it? He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Maybe it is. I'm not interested in being anyone's redemption story, Evan. What if I said I love you? What if I said I never stopped loving you? I'd say that love wasn't enough to keep you faithful the first time. That landed like a slap. His face went pale. Nia, please. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But people can change. Marriages can be rebuilt. Some marriages, not ours. Why not? I chose my words carefully. Because I don't want to rebuild it. You don't mean that. I do mean it. But we were happy. Before everything went wrong, we were happy. No, Evan. You were happy. I was performing. He leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean I spent 3 years trying to be the wife you wanted instead of being myself. I watched what I said, how I dressed, how I acted. I made myself smaller so you could feel bigger. I never asked you to do that. You didn't have to ask. Your disappointment was clear enough. I wasn't disappointed in you. Yes, you were. Every time I spoke passionately about something at a dinner party, every time I disagreed with your friends, every time I reminded people that I had opinions and ideas of my own. That's not true. Evan, you told me I didn't know how to handle myself in social situations. You bought me clothes that were more appropriate for company events. You coached me on what topics to avoid in conversation. I could see him remembering, recognizing the truth in what I was saying. I thought I was helping. You thought you were managing me. We fell quiet again. Through the cafe window, I watched people walking past on the sidewalk. Normal people living normal lives, carrying groceries and walking dogs and talking on phones. It looked peaceful. What can I do? Evan asked. How can I fix this? You can't. There has to be something. I reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. The best thing you can do is let me go. I don't want to let you go. I know, but I'm asking you to anyway. Why? I pulled my hand back. Because I'm finally happy. Really, truly happy. Not performing happiness, or pretending to be happy. actually happy. You could be happy with me. No, I couldn't. Not anymore. Because you can't forgive me? Because I don't want to. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I don't want to go backwards, Evan. I don't want to rebuild something that was broken from the beginning. I want to keep moving forward. With someone else? With myself. That's it? You're just going to be alone forever? I almost smiled. Being alone isn't the worst thing that can happen to someone. It's not the best thing either. No, but it's better than being with someone who makes you feel alone. That seemed to hit him harder than anything else I'd said. He slumped back in his chair, looking defeated. I really screwed this up, didn't I? Yeah, you did. And there's nothing I can say to change your mind. Nothing. He nodded slowly. Dr. Martinez said you might say that. She said real change means accepting consequences, even when they're permanent. She sounds wise. She is. He stood up and reached for his wallet. Coffee's on me. You don't have to. Please, let me buy you one last cup of coffee. I let him pay, and we walked outside together. The afternoon was warm and bright. Fall was coming, but summer was holding on. I'm going to miss you, he said. I know. Will you think of me sometimes? Probably. Good thoughts? I considered the question. Some good thoughts. Some sad ones. Mostly just memory thoughts. He smiled for the first time all afternoon. I can live with memory thoughts. A taxi was waiting at the corner. He'd called it while I wasn't paying attention. Take care of yourself, Nia. You too. He got into the taxi and I watched it drive away. Then I walked to my own car and sat behind the wheel for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. I felt sad for him, sorry that he was hurting. But I also felt something else. Relief. Not because the conversation was over, but because I'd said what I needed to say. Because I'd been honest about what I wanted and didn't want. Because I'd chosen myself over the comfortable path of reconciliation. 3 days later, Mrs. Hamilton called with an offer I couldn't refuse. We'd like you to consider a permanent position with us, she said. Vice President of Cultural Assets, as your ex-husband's father mentioned. But the role would be much broader than just art acquisition. How much broader? You'd oversee our entire cultural portfolio. Museums, galleries, artist residencies, educational programs. You'd have a staff of 12 and a budget of $50 million. I almost dropped the phone. The position comes with a significant salary increase, full benefits, and access to all Hamilton family resources, including, of course, private travel when necessary. Mrs. Hamilton, I don't know what to say. Say yes, dear. You've more than earned it. That evening, I sat on Ruth's porch and told her about the offer. $50 million? She repeated. That's just the annual budget. The position itself pays. Well, more than I ever imagined making. What did you tell her? I said yes. Ruth grinned. Good girl. We sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was quiet, except for the chirping of crickets and the distant sound of children playing in someone's backyard. You know what this means, don't you? Ruth said. What? You won. I didn't know it was a competition. It wasn't. That's why you won. I thought about that as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Maybe Ruth was right. Maybe choosing yourself instead of choosing revenge was its own kind of victory. 2 weeks later, I moved into my new apartment downtown. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. Clean lines, lots of light, space to breathe and think and be myself. I was arranging books on my new shelves when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news about your promotion in the business journal. Congratulations. You deserve it. Yeah, I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without replying. Some conversations were finished. 6 months later, I stood in the Hamilton family hangar, watching Caleb perform his pre-flight check. We were heading to Paris for a museum acquisition meeting, a Degas sketch that would complete Mrs. Hamilton's Impressionist collection. The job had become everything I'd hoped and more. In 6 months, I'd negotiated 3 major acquisitions, launched an educational program for underprivileged students, and established partnerships with museums in 4 countries. The work was challenging, meaningful, and entirely mine. "Ready, Ms. Carter?" Caleb asked, appearing at the bottom of the jet stairs. "Ready." As we climbed to cruising altitude, I opened my laptop and reviewed my notes for the Paris meetings. The seller was an elderly French collector who'd been impressed by my research into the piece's provenance. We'd been corresponding by email for weeks, building the kind of professional relationship I'd never imagined possible when I was married to Evan. My phone buzzed with a message from Ruth. "Saw your interview in Art Weekly. So proud of you." The article had come out that morning, a feature about young executives making waves in the art world. They'd photographed me in my office at the Hamilton building, surrounded by catalogs and artifacts. I looked professional, confident, like I belonged there. Because I did belong there. 3 hours into the flight, I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the clouds below. It was peaceful up here, suspended between earth and sky, moving toward something new. I thought about Evan sometimes, not with longing or regret, but with a kind of distant sadness, like remembering someone who'd died, not the person who'd hurt me, but the person I'd thought he was when I fell in love with him. According to the business journals, his company was doing well. He'd hired a new head of marketing and was expanding into sustainable technologies. Thomas had retired, which probably made things easier for Evan. Less pressure to maintain the family's social expectations. I hoped he was happy. I really did. But I didn't wonder about it often anymore. The Paris meetings went better than expected. The seller, Monsieur Dubois, was charmed by my knowledge of the piece's history and my plans for its display. We finalized the acquisition over dinner at a small bistro near his apartment. "You are very young to have such responsibility," he said as we shared dessert. "I'm older than I look," he laughed. "We are all older than we look, ma chérie. But you have something more important than age." "What's that?" "Passion. You love these pieces, not for their value, but for their beauty, their story. That is rare." He was right. I did love the work. Every morning when I walked into the Hamilton building, I felt grateful to be there. Grateful for the opportunity. Grateful for the trust they'd placed in me. Grateful for the chance to build something meaningful. On the flight home, I dozed against the window as we crossed the Atlantic. I dreamed about the house I was planning to buy, a small place with good light and space for an office. My realtor had found several options, and I'd be looking at them next week. For the first time in my adult life, I was building something that belonged entirely to me. Caleb woke me gently as we approached the airport. "Ms. Carter, we're beginning our descent." I straightened up and looked out the window at the city lights below. Home. Strange how quickly this place had started feeling like home again, now that I wasn't living in someone else's version of my life. Ruth was waiting for me at the hangar with a thermos of coffee and a smile. "How was Paris?" "Successful." And I bought a Degas." She laughed. "Listen to you. I bought a Degas. Like you're talking about picking up groceries." She was right. 6 months ago, the idea of negotiating $1 million art acquisition would have terrified me. Now it felt natural. Normal, even. "Mrs. Hamilton called while you were in the air," Ruth said as we drove back to her house. "She wants to see you first thing Monday morning." "Did she say what about?" "No, but she sounded pleased." Monday morning, I sat in Mrs. Hamilton's elegant office overlooking the city. She was a small woman in her 70s, with silver hair and the kind of quiet confidence that came from generations of wealth responsibly managed. The Paris acquisition was beautifully handled, she said, reviewing the paperwork I'd submitted. Thank you. Monsieur Dubois called personally to tell me how impressed he was with your knowledge and professionalism. He said you understood the piece better than anyone he'd met. I felt a warm glow of pride. It's a remarkable drawing. Yes, it is. Which brings me to why I asked you here. She set down the papers and looked at me directly. We're opening a new foundation, the Hamilton Institute for Cultural Education. We want to make art accessible to young people who might never otherwise see it. That sounds wonderful. We'd like you to run it. I blinked. Run it? Director of the Hamilton Institute. You'd oversee everything. Programming, acquisitions, partnerships, educational outreach. You'd have complete autonomy to build the kind of institution you think the world needs. Mrs. Hamilton, I don't know if I'm qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You understand art, you understand education, and most importantly, you understand what it feels like to be underestimated. She was right about that last part. The board will need to approve the appointment. Of course. But that's a formality. The real question is whether you're interested. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. I'm very interested. Excellent. We'll make the announcement next month. That afternoon, I called Ruth with the news. Director of your own foundation? She repeated. It doesn't feel real yet. It's real, baby. You made it real. 2 weeks later, I moved into my new house, a restored Victorian with tall windows and hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly when I walked across them. It had a small garden where I could plant vegetables and a study where I could work on foundation proposals. I was painting the kitchen on a Saturday afternoon when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of white lilies. Naya Carter? That's me. I signed for the flowers and brought them inside, looking for a card. There wasn't one, but I knew who they were from. Only one person knew that white lilies were my favorite flowers. I put them in a vase and set them on my kitchen table. They were beautiful, but they made me sad in a way I couldn't quite explain. An hour later, my phone rang. Did you get the flowers? Evan's voice was tentative, uncertain. I did. I wanted to congratulate you on the foundation appointment. I read about it in the business journal. Thank you. It sounds like exactly the kind of work you were meant to do. I think it is. There was a long pause. Nia, I know you asked me not to contact you, but I needed you to know how proud I am of everything you've accomplished. I sat down at my kitchen table and looked at the lilies. I appreciate that. You were always brilliant. I should have told you that more often. It's okay, Evan. No, it's not okay, but I'm glad you didn't let my stupidity hold you back. Another pause. Are you happy? He asked. I considered the question seriously. Was I happy? I thought about my new house, my work at the foundation, the quiet satisfaction of building something meaningful. I thought about Ruth's pride in my accomplishments, about Monsieur Dubois' respect for my expertise, about Mrs. Hamilton's trust in my vision. Yes, I said. I am. Good. That's good. Are you? Getting there. Dr. Martinez says healing isn't linear, but I'm making progress. I'm glad. Naya? Yes? I won't call again. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. And that you deserve so much better than what I gave you. Thank you for saying that. Take care of yourself. You too. After he hung up, I sat at my table for a long time, looking at the flowers. They really were beautiful. Perfect white petals, elegant stems, the kind of arrangement you saw in expensive hotel lobbies. Then I picked up the vase and carried it outside to my small front porch. They would be lovely there, visible to anyone passing by. A gift to the neighborhood instead of a private reminder of the past. The next morning was crisp and clear, the first real hint of autumn in the air. I made coffee and sat on my porch steps, watching my neighbors start their day. Mrs. Chen from next door waved as she collected her newspaper. The young couple across the street loaded their baby into a stroller for their morning walk. It was peaceful, normal, mine. My phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Hamilton. Board meeting confirmed for Friday. Excited to make this official. I smiled and typed back, "Thank you for believing in me." Her response came immediately. "Thank you for proving me right." That afternoon, I drove to Ruth's house to help her plant bulbs for spring. We worked together in comfortable silence, preparing the soil for flowers that wouldn't bloom for months. "You know what I love about gardening?" Ruth said as we planted the last tulip bulb. "What?" "It's all about faith. You put something small in the ground and trust that it will become something beautiful." She was right. Faith was exactly what it was. That evening, I sat in my study and worked on proposals for the Foundation's first exhibition. I wanted to start with something that would speak to young people, contemporary artists who tackled social issues, pieces that asked important questions about identity and belonging and justice. I was deep in research when I came across an article about a young artist whose work explored themes of dignity and resilience. One quote jumped out at me. "Art should make us feel less alone in the world. It should remind us that our experiences matter, that our stories have value." I printed the article and added it to my file of potential partnerships. As I worked, I found myself thinking about the path that had led me here. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be running my own foundation, living in my own house, feeling genuinely excited about my future, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I was. 2 months later, the Hamilton Institute for Cultural Education officially opened with a reception that drew art lovers, educators, and community leaders from across the city. I wore a navy blue dress I'd chosen myself and felt completely comfortable in my own skin as I moved through the crowd, discussing programming and partnerships. "Nia, there's someone I'd like you to meet," Mrs. Hamilton said, appearing at my elbow with a distinguished-looking man in tow. "This is Dr. James Crawford from the Smithsonian. He's very interested in our educational programming." I spent the next hour in deep conversation with Dr. Crawford about museum partnerships and traveling exhibitions. It was exactly the kind of work that energized me. Meaningful, collaborative, forward-thinking. Halfway through the evening, I stepped outside for some air and found Ruth on the terrace, looking out at the city lights. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Good. Really good. You look like you belong here." "I feel like I belong here." Ruth smiled. "That's because you do." We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the traffic move through the streets below. From up here, the city looked peaceful, manageable, full of possibility. "Ruth?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." She put her arm around my shoulders. "That's what family does." The next morning, I was in my office early, reviewing applications for our first artist residency program. Each application told a story of creativity and determination, of artists working to make something meaningful despite limited resources. My assistant knocked and entered with a stack of newspapers. "The reviews of last night's opening are in," she said, setting them on my desk. I read through them over coffee. The coverage was universally positive. Glowing reviews of the space, the programming, and the Foundation's mission. One reviewer wrote, "Under Director Nia Carter's leadership, the Hamilton Institute promises to become a vital cultural institution for the next generation." I cut out that quote and pinned it to my bulletin board. At lunch, I met Ruth at our favorite cafe, the same one where Evan had introduced me to Madeline so many months ago. It seemed appropriate somehow, reclaiming that space for something positive. "Look at this," I said, showing her the newspaper reviews. Ruth read them carefully, her smile growing wider with each paragraph. "Listen to this," she said. "Carter brings both scholarly expertise and genuine passion to her role, creating programming that serves the community rather than simply the elite." Not bad for someone who used to just handle logistics, I said. You never just handled logistics. You handled everything. You just finally found people who appreciate what you do. She was right. The Hamilton family had seen something in me that I'd barely seen in myself. They'd given me responsibility and trusted me to rise to it. And I had. That afternoon, I walked through the Foundation's galleries, checking on the installation of our upcoming exhibition. The pieces were powerful. Paintings and sculptures and installations that spoke to themes of identity, resilience, and hope. One painting in particular caught my attention. It showed a woman walking away from a burning house, her back straight and her head held high. The title was Forward. I stood in front of it for a long time, thinking about journeys and destinations, about the difference between running away and moving forward. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the Foundation coverage. Amazing work. Truly happy for you. I looked at the message for a moment, then deleted it without reading it again. Some chapters were closed. Some stories were finished. That evening, I sat in my garden with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The vegetables I'd planted were growing well, tomatoes and peppers and herbs that would season my meals through the fall. I thought about Evan sometimes, but not with sadness anymore. I hoped he was learning to see himself clearly, to challenge his assumptions, to build relationships based on respect rather than status. I hoped he was becoming the person he had the potential to be. But mostly, I thought about my own life, about the foundation we were building, the artists we would support, the young people whose lives might be changed by exposure to art and creativity and possibility. I thought about Ruth's wisdom about gardening, about planting something small and having faith that it would become something beautiful. I thought about morning coffee in my own kitchen, about work that mattered, about the quiet satisfaction of building a life that belonged entirely to me. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called out, and another answered. The sound was peaceful, hopeful, content. I finished my wine and went inside to prepare for tomorrow. There were emails to answer, partnerships to nurture, dreams to make real. In my study, I opened my laptop and began drafting a proposal for next year's programming. The words came easily, flowing from a place of certainty and purpose I'd never known I possessed. At the top of the page, I typed, "The Hamilton Institute believes that art has the power to transform lives by helping people see themselves and their world with new clarity." I paused and smiled. Some mornings he still sees me happy without him. And that, I realized, was exactly where I wanted to be. The end.